Carbonara is one of the most popular and most controversial recipes in the world.
Spaghetti carbonara.
A little bit of parsley.
Butter, egg, bacon.
Ma chi t'ha detto?
But somehow, not even these reaction artists seem to know when or even where it began. So in this video, we are going to dive into the real documented origins of carbonara and the truly unbelievable ways the recipe's changed over the years. And to do that, I'm gonna share 4 iconic recipes from carbonara's past. The first recipe from America, the original Italian recipe, a 3-star Michelin carbonara, and the trendy carbonara recipe that most people use today. I say trendy because that particular recipe, the one where any small changes make Italians scream,
Mamma mia!
is actually younger than I am. And last but not least, after trying all 4 of these recipes, I will bestow upon one of them the title Rex Carbonarum, or King of Carbonara. So let's start this thing off with a good old-fashioned origin story. There is a storm of speculation surrounding the true origin of carbonara. And despite what the comments will undoubtedly suggest, nobody knows the first time a plate of carbonara was actually made. I heard that the first carbonara was made when an American soldier and a Roman chef pooled together their leftovers after World War II. Got any 7s? Go fish, and actually you're wrong. It's from the 1800s when a secret society of carbonara revolutionaries used to serve it at their secret meetings. Uno. Actually, you're both wrong. For centuries, the charcoal makers around Rome used to eat it for lunch. That's why they call it carbonara. Longest train. Now, people may act like the recipe for carbonara was written thousands of years ago by Jesus Christ himself, then passed down to Abraham and the 12 apostles. But the first written record of a dish called carbonara is just over 70 years old. And it has changed a lot since it was first written down in 1952 in Chicago. That's Chicago, Illinois, by the way, in the United States. And since then, both Americans and Italians have been making carbonara with bacon, parsley, garlic, onions, mushrooms, clams, and even heavy cream. Actually, lots of heavy cream. Hold up, clams? No frickin' way. Forse negli Stati Uniti, ma mai in Italia. No. He said in Italy. Stronzo. See? I knew that some of you wouldn't believe me. But that is why I put the links to all of my sources and the full recipes from this video down in the description. I promise you, I am not making any of this up. Here on this channel, we stick to the facts. And the fact of the matter is, no matter how long people in Italy were eating carbonara in secret societies or eating it for lunch at work, miraculously, nobody ever recorded a single recipe, wrote about it in their journal, or served it at any restaurant until 1952, when Patricia Bronte included a dish called pasta carbonara in her book Vittles and Vice, where pasta carbonara was the featured dish from the Italian restaurant Armando's, where it was created by chefs Armando Lorenzini and Pietro Lencioni. And no, these are not their actual photos. I just Googled Italian guy, black and white, and picked the first 2 that came up. In all honesty, I don't think Patricia Bronte knew that this recipe was going to become such a big deal. Or she may have included photos or written more than 5 sentences that straddle a page break. But this is more than enough to go on. So let's start cooking and try the first recipe ever recorded for carbonara. Boil 1.5 pounds of tagliarini, thin, wide noodles, according to the directions on the package. Meanwhile, chop and fry 1/2 pound of mezzina, Italian bacon, or in other words, pancetta. Take 4 eggs and 1/4 pound of grated Parmesan cheese and lightly whip together. Mix everything together and toss over a flame. Serves 4. The first carbonara recipe is actually pretty close to what a lot of Americans still use in modern day America. My guess is that it was similar back then to how it is now, where pancetta and Parmesan are way easier to find in the US than Guanciale and Pecorino Romano. So really, they were just following the #1 rule of cooking, which is use what you got. So how does it taste? All right, the lack of pepper makes this recipe taste distinctly old-fashioned to me, like all nourish and no flourish. As for the fresh tagliarini noodles, an egg pasta with an egg sauce is just a bit too one note for me, but with the pancetta and Parmesan, I can see why this dish caught on. All in all, I give it a 6 out of 10. So does this mean that carbonara is American? Well, no. However, it does justify me saying carbonara for the rest of the video instead of struggling to say carbonara 1,000 times. But let's get back to carbonara, which is undeniably multicultural. And the dish we know today has undergone most of its evolution in Italy. So to continue the story, let's go to Italy. Ciao! Wait, can you see that sign right there?
No, not really. You can't read it.
And just like, those palm trees are good?
No, you're good.
Like it looks like we're in Italy?
Yeah, don't worry about it. Everything
Okay.
looks great.
Ciao, and welcome to Italy, where the recipe for spaghetti alla carbonara first appeared in the Italian magazine La Cucina Italiana in August of 1954. It's hard to say whether the Italian recipe was inspired by the American recipe at all, because while they both contain pancetta, eggs, and cheese, the Italian recipe has Swiss Gruyere cheese instead of the Italian Parmesan. It's kind of ironic that the American recipe has more Italian ingredients than the Italian one, but it doesn't matter where the ingredients come from because the Rex Carbonarum is decided by taste alone. So let's get back to the kitchen and try la ricetta originale di spaghetti alla carbonara. As the pasta cooks in salted water till al dente, fry the pancetta and garlic in a small pan until crispy, before removing the garlic. Combine the eggs, pancetta, Gruyere, spaghetti, and plenty of pepper in a large mixing bowl and stir until the eggs start to thicken and the cheese melts. Once the sauce is to your liking, plate and serve immediately. You can tell from the steam coming off of this that it is as good as it could possibly be. My kitchen's like right there, so all these dishes I'm trying at their best. And I will say this one does have some improvements over the first recipe. First off, I do think replacing the egg pasta with a dried spaghetti was the right call. Also, adding the pepper really balances out the richness of the sauce. But we gotta talk about the Gruyere cheese. So first off, cutting it into cubes like the recipe suggested just makes it take way too long to melt. It really should be shredded or grated. And also, Gruyere is one of my favorite cheeses, but melting it down into a sauce like this on low heat just erases all of these subtle notes that make it such a good cheese. So all in all, I'll give this recipe a 6.2 out of 10. L'Originale was obviously not good enough to stand the test of time, because almost immediately after appearing, the adaptations, experiments, and substitutions began flooding in. Italian chefs experimented with onions, clams, mushrooms, cream, butter, cognac, nutmeg, pecorino, and parsley. And when the dust had settled around 1989, a new recipe had emerged from the one and only Gualtiero Marchesi, a recipe that I'm calling 3-Star Bonara. Now, a lot of you may not know the name Gualtiero Marchesi, but that's totally fine. Just know that he's considered by many to be the founder, il padrino, the godfather, of modern Italian cuisine. He was the first Italian chef to ever win 2 Michelin stars, then the first to win 3. But if you're one of the people who don't think Michelin stars really mean anything, well, neither did he, because he was the first chef to ever give his stars back. He brought in a new wave of fancy techniques and creative recipes to help elevate the reputation of Italian food on the world stage. But he also didn't mind dropping into Mickey D's and doing a few Italian burger collabs. His philosophies around simple Italian ingredients and classic Italian recipes inspired a generation of Italian chefs that carry on his legacy today. And it's this focus on simple Italian ingredients that I think made the biggest difference in the development of the modern carbonara. Because in the decades-long mess of carbonara experimentation, there were 2 ingredients that broke through the noise, and they're now practically synonymous with carbonara today: Pecorino Romano and Guanciale. Pecorino Romano replaced Parmigiano Reggiano. Nowadays, Parmesan is making a bit of a comeback, but I will talk about that with the trendy recipe. Guanciale, or cured pig jowl, which was first added to carbonara in 1960 by Luigi Carnacina, is a lot fattier than pancetta, or Italian bacon, which was being used at the time. He likely got the idea from other pasta dishes like amatriciana and gricia, which had been using guanciale for centuries by that point. Because remember, this recipe, which uses heavy cream and butter, is from 1989. Yes, Taylor Swift walked among us, or crawled, and Italians were still using heavy cream in their carbonara. But he is the maestro, so let's give it a shot. Mix together 2 egg yolks, pecorino, pepper, and just a dash of heavy cream. Psych! This recipe has lots of heavy cream. Fry the guanciale with butter until crispy, and then the recipe says to toss everything in a pan off the heat, but that was far too messy. So I just got a big wok and tossed everything in that instead. And because this is a Michelin star dish after all, it doesn't hurt to plate it with some tweezers so that it looks extra fancy. Okay, this could be Rex Carbonarum. I mean, the guanciale and pecorino romano are huge improvements in my book, but this is unlike any carbonara that I've ever tasted. Dare I say better? It's definitely the creamiest, so I will give 3 Starbonara a 9 out of 10. It's worth putting yourself back in 1989 and imagining that Gualtiero Marchesi made a carbonara recipe. Why didn't the Italians protect that recipe? Why did they take out the cream and butter? And why do they pretend like this recipe never existed?
Forbidden. No cream in your carbonara. It's forbidden.
Absolutely forbidden.
Who knows why carbonara changed after 1989? But it did. And then it changed again and again and again. Because that is what trends do. If you've eaten or even heard of carbonara, chances are it was this recipe, the classic 5-ingredient carbonara. Now, you can tweak the ratios a bit, but every version of this dish is gonna have the same 5 ingredients. So let's go through them one by one. Dried or semolina pasta, just not fresh or egg-based pasta. With the sauce, it's a little bit too eggy. Spaghetti and mezze maniche are 2 of the most common shapes for a modern carbonara. But bucatini is becoming more and more popular because of its thicker shape and extra chew. So for the trendy recipe, I'm gonna use some bucatini. Guanciale has firmly established itself as the optimal choice for a modern carbonara. Some people still prefer pancetta or bacon, but just tell people you're more of a traditionalist than a modernist. At this point, replacing guanciale with pancetta is kind of like replacing the chocolate chips in a chocolate chip cookie with raisins. There's definitely a difference, and people will have some strong opinions. When I was visiting Rome a couple of years ago, I had a carbonara with smoked guanciale, and it was the best carbonara that I've ever had, so that is what I'm using here. Shaved down and sliced into thick little blocks. Smoked guanciale, or any guanciale for that matter, can be hard to find in the US, so I'm gonna link my supplier. Eggs. Some people like only yolks, and some people like mostly yolks. At the end of the day, it's personal preference. A good rule of thumb, and the recipe I'm gonna use today, is 1 yolk per person and 1 whole egg for the table. So for 2 servings, that's 2 yolks and 1 whole egg. Cheese. Now, this one's a little bit tricky because my personal favorite recipe is actually not the trending one. I've made carbonara for years with only Pecorino Romano. It's a sharp and tangy sheep's cheese, and as you now know, pure Pecorino was the established recipe for decades. But the current trend is to cut the Pecorino Romano with Parmigiano Reggiano or Grana Padano, which are cow cheeses that are made in a similar way with a slightly lighter and more nutty flavor. So I'm gonna go with the trend and use a 2-to-1 blend of Pecorino Romano and Grana Padano. And the final ingredient is a hefty amount of freshly ground black pepper. Now, some people like to say, "You're wrong, for I have the longest train." And you're also wrong about the name carbonara. It is not named for the charcoal makers who consume it, but because a real carbonara has so much black pepper added to it that the sauce itself is as dark and black as charcoal. Not gonna lie, man, that sounds like way too much black pepper. Yeah, come to think of it, I've never really had a carbonara that isn't bright yellow. Well, I guess you can't believe everything you hear on the internet, unless they link their sources. Self-righteous hyperbole aside, black pepper is a main ingredient in this dish, so don't be shy. The trendy recipe follows the same steps as the other ones. Fry the meat, cream the sauce, and then toss everything together on a low heat. I'm putting all the techniques and tricks for a perfect carbonara in my next video, so subscribe to see that one and also learn about more recipes like this beautiful, creamy, trendy carbonara. This is what I think of when I think of carbonara. And before doing all this research for this video, this was all I thought of when I thought of carbonara. Rich but peppery, cheesy with kind of an al dente bite. But even with just 5 ingredients, people still have their preferences of more pecorino or less pepper, more yolks or unsmoked guanciale. So with nobody even able to agree on the recipe, could this be the Rex Carbonarum, or is it just another trend? So, with that in mind, the Rex Carbonarum, the king of carbonaras, and a dish that Julius Caesar himself would be proud to salute. The classic yet unique, the rich yet refreshing, the touched up yet untouchable. With a 9.3 out of 10, the Trendy Carbonara is the Rex Carbonarum. That is, until the next version comes along.